Thomas Jefferson said it well. He said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. So it comes down with walls in everybody's minds. And that's why when you help people to see the truth, they're not compartmentalized. Compartmentalization is a big thing. Like, I'm on a need-to-know basis. That's classified. That's above my pay grade. And so they're able to compartmentalize everybody so nobody can actually see the forest through the trees and get the big picture.
Right.
And that's why the biggest secret is so important.
Why don't you explain to us the big secret? I want you to explain the big secret.
I love explaining the big secret.
And then we can go on with the interview after the big secret.
Okay. We got this blank whiteboard here. I've never actually done it on a whiteboard, but
there you go.
I was intrigued because I'm trying to consolidate 30,000 pages of law that I read into one page. Mm-hmm. And I've been pretty good over the years to try to take complex things and make them simple. But like I was saying about compartmentalization, who's compartmentalized? Well, doctors, right? Doctors, you know, you got your endocrinologists, you got your immunologists, you got your cardiologists. They're good at the cardiovascular system and the endocrine system and the immune system, but they just have their specialties. They don't really see the body as a whole system where everything needs to be flowing, synergistically. And they don't know how to cure anything. The medical doctors that go through medical school, all they know is give you the drugs for these disease symptoms.
Right.
You got diabetes, well, insulin. You got arthritis, Celebrex. You got allergies, Clarinex, right? None of the drugs actually go to fix the root cause of why you're sick in the first place.
Correct.
They just go to manage the symptoms. And if you have natural, non-toxic, pharmaceutical-grade products without any side effects, it can never become standard of care, so insurance won't cover it, and doctors can't recommend it because their malpractice insurance only covers standard of care. So if you don't have a deadly, debilitating, destructive, addictive, toxic pharmaceutical drug with side effects, it can never be FDA approved. You got the natural stuff, they don't approve it. So crazy.
It is crazy.
Lawyers are compartmentalized. Why do I say that? Well, you got your traffic lawyers and the family court lawyers. You got the military lawyers and the criminal lawyers and the securities lawyers. There's a million different lawyers. And they all have all their specialties too. And they have to be because the statutes at large, titles 1 to 50, are 250,000 pages long. You got 250,000 pages. If you read for 10 hours a day, it would take you 10 years to read the law once. That's just federal. That's not state laws or city laws or, dude.
Yeah.
What lawyer or judge has read 10 hours a day for 10 years? They don't know the law.
Right.
The Bar Association, which is why the 13th Amendment, one of the 13th Amendments, right? The Constitution of the United States, Constitution for the United States, right? We got the 13th Amendment that bans slavery. The other 13th Amendment bans titles of nobility like esquires or lawyers from holding office. Why? Because they don't want a supra organization from Britain called the Bar Association to control the executive branch and the congressional branch and the judicial branch,
Correct.
Which is what they do now. The bar controls it all. Their people are in all the positions.
Correct.
And then they compartmentalize all these guys so they can control and enslave everybody else. Bar is it's British.
Yeah.
So that's why, the founders were like, no lawyers. If you're a lawyer out there, well, here, you're going to love this. This is, but everybody really is compartmentalized, not just lawyers. I'll put everyone. Joe the plumber. Remember Joe the plumber?
Yeah.
Joe the plumber was told that George Washington was the first president of the United States, right?
That's not true.
That's what you were told. That's what you were told, right?
That's a bullshit story.
Yeah, there were 10 presidents of the United States before George Washington.
Yeah.
Under this Articles of Confederation from 1776 to 1787, we had 10 presidents. Arthur Sinclair, Thomas Mifflin, Thomas McKean, Elias Monet, and John Hanson. And then George Washington became the 11th president of the United States in 1789, first under the Constitution, but the 11th president of the United States. So I always got to thinking, well, what is this United States that they're talking about? Because out of the 250,000 pages of law, they mention the United States quite often. Wouldn't you want to know which United States they're talking about? Because in Hooven Allison versus Evatt, they gave us 3 different definitions of 3 different United States. Okay? Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll erase that, and I'll put the United States. So number one, USA, is the country of the United States. This is the biggest secret. What's the country made up of? The 50 states of the Union and the territories, possessions, and enclaves. I call this the Fed Zone, United States. So, the second United States is the 50 states of the Union only, and it excludes the territories, possessions, and enclaves. And the third United States is the Fed Zone United States, and it excludes the 50 states of the Union. So there's 3 different United States. And when you're reading the law, they don't really tell you which one they're talking about. I mean, they do, but it's like in the definition section 47 pages later. You know, they call it legalese or words of art, where a pink Ferrari means a yellow Volkswagen Bug. So you got to look at the definitions because they use words. They're very deceptive. Yeah. These guys are smart. Now, what are the differences? Well, the 50 states of the Union, California, Colorado, and Florida. If you're born there, you're what's called an 8 U.S.C. 1101 A21 American national. If you were born in Puerto Rico or Guam, Samoa, the Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, or Washington, D.C., you're an 8 U.S.C. 1401 U.S. citizen. So there's Americans here, U.S. citizens here. This flag is red, white, and blue. This flag is red, white, and blue with gold fringes. This is the Republic of Texas, right? They invert everything. There's the Republic of Texas, the de jure constitutional
confusing
republic.
on purpose.
There's the state of Texas, this de facto corporate state, right? They've got, lawful money versus legal tender, right? You read the Constitution, lawful money is gold and silver.
Right.
Why do we have Federal Reserve notes?
Exactly.
Treasury Secretary, Secretary of Treasury. State of California, California State. Right? So they've created these illusionary, it's inverse, it's upside down. And it's meant to distract and deceive us from how things truly work. It's kind of how they, if you really want to restore the republic, you have to dissolve the de facto corporate state. So Congress legislates for 2 entities. One is called the federal government that handles business amongst the 50 states of the Union. When you read the Constitution, it's pretty clear. Anything that comes into the country, the tariffs, the duties, the customs, the imports, all that, federal. Anything that crosses state lines, like the money crosses state lines. So if you're busted counterfeiting, that's a federal crime. The mail crosses state lines, so mail fraud would be a federal crime. Patents, trademarks, copyrights, that's all federal. And that's it. Everything else was reserved for the states or the people per the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution. However, Congress also legislates for the national government. So federal government here, national government here. What does the national government do? That handles business amongst the territories, possessions, and enclaves. And under the national government, they're not bound by the chains of the Constitution. They can do whatever the heck they want in Puerto Rico and Guam. Okay? So Congress, now when they're legislating, how can you tell who those new laws are directed towards? U.S. citizens living in the Fed zone or Americans living in the 50 states of the Union? How can you tell? I've asked this question to dozens of lawyers. They can't tell me the answer.
Because they don't know.
It's the biggest secret.
They don't know.
Here's how, of course they don't know. They're compartmentalized. They're not supposed to know. It's above their pay grade. They're on a need-to-know basis. It's classified.
Exactly.
It's not really. You just have to be able to read and comprehend what you're reading. But here's how this works. If Congress passes an act, a bill, a statute, and the president signs it into law, if that law has a corresponding regulation that's been published in the Federal Registrar, giving the public reasonable notice that this law applies to them, then that's called positive law, and it applies everywhere in the country, both the 50 states of the Union and the Fed zone. But if that statute does not have a corresponding regulation that's been published in the Federal Registrar, giving the public reasonable notice that this law applies to them, then that is not positive law, and it only applies to U.S. citizens and employees of the federal government, people in the military, in the territories, possessions, and enclaves. It doesn't apply to everyone, just these guys. When Joe Biden makes an executive order, it doesn't apply to everybody, just people in the Fed zone. right? I mean, Congress clearly makes the law according to the Constitution, not the president. So executive orders don't even apply, right, to everybody. So knowing that, I wanted to know, out of the 250,000 pages of law, titles 1 to 50, how many of those titles are positive law? You want to know?
Tell me.
27. That means, no, 23 are positive law, 27 are not. Well, what are the big ones? Well, Title 15, the Securities Act, only applies to U.S. citizens, doesn't apply to Americans. Title 26, the income tax, only U.S. citizens have to pay income taxes. Americans don't, only U.S. citizens do. Title 42, the Social Security Ponzi scam, only U.S. citizens can participate in the Ponzi scam. Americans can't. Title 50, the draft, you can only draft U.S. citizens. You can't draft Americans. So then how are they able to superimpose Fed zone laws onto people that live and work in the 50 states of the Union? How are they able to do that? That's the next question. Mm-hmm. Let me get the eraser. I thought you'd never ask. Okay, let's see here. We'll start here. Let's look at the chain of command. God creates mankind with rights. Okay? Men and women create the families. The families create the towns and cities. Cities and towns create the states. And the states got together and created the federal government, not the other way around. Okay, what did the federal government create? The U.S. citizen franchise. Now, U.S. citizens have no rights. They only have privileges. Okay? So it's the fall of man. So mankind, men and women, are born with rights, and then they give up those rights for a bowl of porridge, benefits they call it. And they give them up and they become U.S. citizens. You have to apply to become a U.S. citizen. And now you fill this office within government. You're an officer of the office, or the franchisee of the franchise, or the trustee of this trust. And now you have to get licenses to do everything because you have no rights. U.S. citizens have to get licenses to hunt and fish and practice law and medicine and drive and go get married. You know, licenses are to give you permission to do something which would otherwise be illegal. It's not illegal to get married, so why would you get a marriage license? Well, if you're operating as a U.S. citizen, you have to, because once you get that marriage license, now you fall into this civil statutory maze of family court. If you join the military and you sign the enlistment papers, now you're under the jurisdiction of the military. Yeah, you get the driver's license, now you're under traffic court, etc. So all these civil statutory courts require our consent. How do we give our consent? Well, we apply. We sign up for it. We choose the domicile. If you domicile yourself in Florida, then California laws don't apply to you. Cannabis is legal here in Colorado, but if you drive across the border to Kansas, it's still illegal. And if you don't want to pay taxes, you move to New Hampshire. They have no income tax or sales tax. But if you live across the border in Massachusetts, you have to pay both. So all these civil statutory laws require our consent, and we do that by where we choose to domicile ourselves. They call them the residence. The res is the thing identified. The thing identified, this legal fiction entity that you're an officer of, that you think is you, isn't you. It's just this trust, and you're the trustee of this trust, but it's their property. It's kind of like when you go into the NFL league, right? You have this league called the NFL, and they have teams or franchises. They call them the Broncos franchise or the Patriots franchise. And, you know, John Elway, the human being, fills the office of quarterback, because these franchises have positions or offices, wide receiver, quarterback, running back. So John Elway fills the office of quarterback, or the position of quarterback, for the franchise, the Broncos, in the league, the NFL. So he has all these rules that apply to him that don't apply to you or I, you know, playing football in the park. None of the NFL rules apply to us. Only John Elway, because he signed the contract. He joined the league. If you set up a McDonald's franchise, McDonald's, they got that's the mothership corporation, and they have franchises. Well, what do they need? They need humans, franchisees, they call them, to run the franchise. So you sign up, you sign the contract, they make you go to McDonald's University. You got to learn how to make Big Macs. You can't sell Whoppers, only Big Macs, right? You got to wear the uniforms with the gold arches and what have you. And so you're the human, the franchisee, you're running the franchise. Now this franchise is property of McDonald's. If you mess up, they take it away from you and sell it to somebody else because the franchise is their property. So, you follow all these rules, and every time you sell Big Mac, you have to pay a kickback of money to the mothership corporation, McDonald's. Now you, the human, can have a side gig, mowing lawns and shoveling snow. You, the human, don't pay a kickback to McDonald's. Just the franchise pays the kickback, not you. So you just cross out that and call it USA Inc. They have these franchises or offices called U.S. Citizen. They need the human being to fill that office, to be the officer of the office, or the franchisee of the franchise, or the trustee of this trust. Okay, me, the human, is capital J, capital O, capital B, capital Y. But the office is capital J, capital O, capital B, capital Y, Inc. This is an entity. It's tied to your slave surveillance number or your social security number. I call it a slave surveillance number.
That's exactly what it is.
It's exactly what it is. You signed up to be a slave. They can't enslave you, they can't use force to enslave you. You have to voluntarily sign up to be a slave. So you go from a free person where the only rules are the common law, right? The criminal law, which is, don't harm others, don't violate their property or their person, right? And so there's 9 rules to follow, 10 rules, 10 commandments, basically. And then you sign up to be a U.S. citizen, and you apply, you get the slave surveillance number, and now you got 250,000 pages of rules that now apply to you, that never applied to you before. Why would you do that?
Exactly.
Because you don't know, because you're compartmentalized, and none of the lawyers know, and the top, the 10 lawyers in this country that do know don't want anybody else to know, because it keeps the gravy train going. And this can work with anything. If this is eBay, eBay's got a platform. If you voluntarily sign up and create an account on eBay, which is their property, not yours, just like you create a Facebook profile, that's Facebook's property, not yours. Your Apple ID is Apple's property, not yours. That's why they can track everything you do and everywhere you go and make trillions of dollars off your data, is because it's not yours, it's theirs. Okay? So when you voluntarily go on eBay and you say, I'm going to sell something, well, guess what? eBay's getting paid. You're using their platform. That's their property, okay? So you got to use PayPal, and they get a fee. There's no law that says you can't not be on eBay and can't not go sell stuff at your yard sale, out on your front porch, out of your garage. If you sell stuff in your garage, you don't have to pay eBay fees. But when you sell on eBay, you do. And that's what they do. They created this franchise for you, this identity, solving for identity, and wait till they come out with your social credit score and your CBDCs and all this stuff. This entity is their property, USA Inc. They give it to you, and they say, hey, you can have this with strings attached, meaning this franchise makes money. You have to pay a kickback, W-2s, W-4s, 1099s, right? This is what they want to solve for identity. This is the entity they want you to set up a Coinbase account with, or a bank account, or hold title to real estate or your car in this entity, so that they can take your stuff with asset forfeiture and eminent domain without, which would normally violate the Fifth Amendment's takings clause, right? So they can just steal your stuff without due process, because you don't own your house, you don't own the bank account, you don't own your car. They do, because you put it in the name of the entity that they own. It's called taking and converting private property into whatever the word is. I hear an alarm going off that threw me off. But they convert our private property into shared property with the government. You, the human being, can have a side gig mowing lawns and shoveling snow and make money. You, the human, don't have to pay a kickback. Only the franchise has to pay a kickback. This entity, Joby, me, the flesh, blood human being with rights, the American, can set up a Bitcoin wallet in 10 seconds. No ID necessary. But try to set up a Coinbase account, and you got to show them your proof of residence, right? They want to know the jurisdiction. They want to put you in the box. KYC, yeah, and AML, and all these types of things. So they created this Babylonian matrix of a sandbox, and no man can serve two masters. You either serve God or you serve the devil.
So when does the God law come in, and when would we get governmente out of our minds and out of our lives?
Yeah, government just means mind control. But the convert our private property into shared property with the government. You, the human, don't have to pay a kickback. Only the franchise has to pay a kickback. This entity, Joby, me, the flesh, blood human being with rights, the American, can set up a Bitcoin wallet in 10 seconds. No ID necessary. But try to set up a Coinbase account, and you got to show them your proof of residence, right? They want to know the jurisdiction. They want to put you in the box.
So when is the God law come in, and when do we get governmente out of our minds and out of our lives?
Yeah, government just means mind control. Well, if you signed up voluntarily for it, you can unsign up voluntarily for it. And I highly recommend everybody opt out.